Hey everyone, Aaron here from MTGChallengers, and welcome to another Magic the Gathering deck tech. Today I'll be going over Orzhov Midrange for Born of the Gods Standard. So this is a mid-range deck featuring white and black, two of the most powerful colors in the format right now, and it's one of my personal favorite decks to play. It's very much a shell of the ever-popular Mono Black Devotion, but with the splash of white, it's able to replace some of Mono Black's weaker cards and come up with a deck that's still consistent, but a lot more dynamic and fun to play in my opinion. So let's get started with the creatures here. First up, I have 4 Pack Rat. Just an awesome early turn creature to get out there turn 2. If left unabated, it can really get out of control, especially since this deck plays 4 Mutavault, and the synergy between those two cards can be downright unfair. It's an outlet to get rid of dead cards in your hand, excess lands, and things like that. It's particularly strong against aggressive decks, since they don't have a lot of removal to deal with it early on, so I can clear their board with all the removal I have in here, and then just make a bunch of copies and eventually kill them. Against more mid-range and control decks that have a lot of ways to kill it early on, it will be sided out a decent bit of the time, but it's still absolutely worth it in the main deck. Next up, I have a playset of Desecration Demon. This has become pretty standard in most black decks. The card is just really awesome right now. With Lingering Souls out of the format, he's seeing significant play now, and he's just a great card. He controls your opponent's board state really well in case you don't draw much removal, all while getting bigger. Or if you do draw a lot of removal, you can clear their board of things to sacrifice to him and just have a 6/6 flyer for 4 to bash in every turn until they die. He's a great control card, and oftentimes he wins you the game. Next up is one of the main reasons to splash white for this deck, Blood Baron of Vizkopa. I have a playset of it. It's just an insane card in the format right now, and it's so easily splashed for in this deck since it's just single white intensive. Protection from black and from white is tremendous. It dodges a ton of removal like Hero's Downfall and Detention Sphere. It can't be blocked by anything in those colors. And having lifelink on top of that just pushes it way over the top. It's a really good stabilizer against aggressive creature decks, and it can be a win condition with the second ability. Gruul Monsters is really the matchup where the card pales a little bit, since red and green are the two colors that it isn't protected from. They can block it and kill it with Pelucranos and Stormbreath Dragon really easily, and they do run one of the only removal spells that actually hits it, which is Mizzium Mortars. So in that matchup, I probably would side out a couple for some more removal, but overall this card is amazing. Then I have the final creature in the deck, Obzedat Ghost Council. I'm running 2 copies of him. A really incredible card. It's an awesome stabilizer for mid-range decks, and the draining for 2 life every turn really adds up. The exiling in return also means that it will dodge all the sorcery speed removal like Supreme Verdict and Detention Sphere, and it being able to come back with haste as a 5-power attacker is just insane. The only slightly bad part about it in this deck is the mana cost. Double white, of course, is kind of stretching it as a splash, but I am running 12 sources of white in the mana base, and being played turn 5 plus, it is a fairly late game spell, so the chances of getting double white are improved in that respect. I usually get the double white, it's just something to watch out for. So that's it for the creatures. Onto the spells. I have 4 copies of Thoughtseize. This shouldn't require a whole lot of explanation. It's the best black card in the format arguably, and it's superb in decks like this. It disrupts so well, it gets rid of those hard to remove gods, also can get rid of enchantments and planeswalkers game 1, gives you information. There's just very little not to like about this card. It's particularly good against the Devotion decks, since they rely more heavily on interactions, so you can Thoughtseize them and take their Grey Merchant, Thassa, Master of Waves, Domri Raid, Xenagos. It's just an all-purpose disruption spell, and it's essential to this deck's functionality. And since I am running 9 basic swamps in the mana base, there still will be a decent bit of turn 1 Thoughtseize action without having to take another 2 life from a shockland. Then I have a playset of Devour Flesh. Really cheap, efficient spell to get rid of that one creature on the board that's messing you up. They will gain life off of it, but it doesn't really matter if that means their win condition goes down the drain. It can deal with opponents' Blood Barons and things with hexproof. It's just a nice consistent spell to keep them on their toes, and if I really need to gain some life, I can do it to myself and sacrifice my Desecration Demon or something like that and gain back a whole bunch. Then I have 2 one-ofs, Doomblade and Ultimate Price. They're really just placeholders here. I needed a couple more removal spells, and these are decent for that. Only one-ofs due to their restrictions, which can be really bad in this format, but they can be sided out really easily if they aren't relevant in any particular matchup. Next, I have 3 copies of Bile Blight, one of the awesome new black removal spells from Born of the Gods. -3/-3 will kill a significant bit of creatures in the format right now, and it does deal with Elspeth tokens, pack rats, and Burning Tree emissaries excellently. Again, if the matchup just isn't very good for them, like up against Gruul monsters where most of their stuff is 4 toughness plus, it will probably be sided out, but it's usually really awesome. Then I have the standard playset of Hero's Downfall, absolutely necessary in this format to have an unbiased removal spell that doesn't care about color or power or toughness, just straight up destroy target creature. And having Planeswalker on it as well pushes it way over the top, since there are just so many running around right now. Kiora, Jace, Elspeth, Domri Raid, Xenagos. This is definitely a Planeswalker heavy format, and it's definitely a much needed spell. Onto some other permanents I have in here. 2 copies of Underworld Connections are good for some card advantage in the slower matchups. Just a 2 of, since I needed to make room for some of the white spells. Also, I'm not running Grey Merchant, so I don't need the Devotion. They will be sided out in some of the faster matchups, but as a 2 of in the main deck, it's definitely worth it to have some card draw. And then the final spell I have in here is Elspeth, Sun's Champion. 2 copies of her, absolutely love her in this deck. She's a great win condition, and since she's pretty late game, you usually won't have any difficulty at all getting the double white for her. She'll just create tons of tokens that will protect her until she gets to her ultimate, and then they'll just fly over and kill your opponent, usually in one swing. She can also deal with pesky Blood Barons, Desecration Demons, and Stormbreath Dragons with her -3 ability. She's just amazing for mid-range and control decks, and that's no exception here. Moving on to the mana base, I have the 12 dual lands in black and white, so 4 Godless Shrine, 4 Temple of Silence, and 4 Orzhov Guildgate. It's awesome that all 12 are available, so I don't have to compromise the black in the deck by playing any basic planes. These 12 sources of white are almost always enough. Then I have a playset of Mutavault, an amazing land to have in here. I feel that the mana base in this deck is consistent enough to be able to support the full 4. Aside from just being a late game win condition after they've run out of steam in their hand or you've just cleared their board, it synergizes with pack rats so well. Since the creature has all creature types, that includes rats, so you can animate it as you swing in with your other pack rats to pump all of them, since it will increment your rat count. And swinging in with Mutavaults and pack rats will kill your opponent incredibly fast. And finally, I have 9 basic swamps for a total of 25 lands. Really good amount for mid-range to always hit those 5th and 6th land drops, which are extremely important to this deck. So that's it for the main board, let's move on to the sideboard. I have 3 copies of Sin Collector, another area where I splash white in this deck. Really good sideboard card against control decks to take away their counter spells, Sphinx's Revelations, Supreme Verdicts, things like that. And even if they don't have anything, I still do get to look at their hand, and I will get some information. Next, I have 2 copies of Dark Betrayal, just an efficient card to have against black decks like the Mirror matchup, and of course Mono Black Devotion. Paying just 1 mana to kill their Desecration Demon at instant speed is an awesome feeling. I also have 3 Wear and Tear, obviously only using it for tear, which is just fine since enchantments are the only thing worth destroying in this format right now. I like this a little bit more than Revoke Existence since it's cheaper and it's at instant speed. Sure, the exiling on the Revoke can be useful, but in those cases Thoughtseize will get the job done. Then I have 3 one-ofs, Doomblade, Ultimate Price, and Bile Blight. Just a nice sideboard removal package. The various matchups that each will go into should be pretty self-explanatory. Doomblade into anything not black, Ultimate Price against the monocolored Devotion decks, and Bile Blight against the aggressive decks running a lot of small creatures. I have Drown in Sorrow as a 2 of, obviously against, again, the aggressive decks where almost everything is 1 and 2 toughness. Just one of these can be really devastating to those decks, and getting to scry 1 on top of it is awesome. It's also good since it doesn't kill hardly any of my creatures, so it will be one-sided most of the time. And finally, I have 2 Whip of Erebos. Sided in against the aggressive decks mainly, where all you really need to do is gain a decent bit of life before they run out of steam in their hand. It's also amazing with Obzedat, since if he's killed, you can reanimate him with the Whip's ability, and at the end step, as the active player, you can choose to use the exile ability on Obzedat rather than the Whip, and he'll come back the next turn, so you can keep him alive infinitely as long as you have the Whip out. So that's it for this deck tech. Be sure to check out our others. To see these decks in action, check out our gameplays, and also be sure to check out our Facebook page for behind the scenes information regarding upcoming decks, gameplays, and other projects. Thanks for visiting, and if you like what you see, subscribe for more Magic the Gathering content.